members for taking the time to ask the questions. I think what this does is really allows people to look at in detail some of the issues, get them out in front, and more importantly allows the staff the time to sort of respond to them so that we're not trying to create answers. I mean, we all think pretty quickly in our feet, but it's possible to do that with a 500-page budget. So I want to thank everybody for putting this together. Tonight, we are going to be reviewing sections 1 through a portion of 4. Really, first section is introductions, and the second is policies, and third is the budget summary. We'll probably spend most time on the budget, on the school profiles. Our goal is not to get through all the profiles this evening, but we will come back during the second meeting, and we'll continue with 5, go into 6, and then we'll finish out with the last budget review. Section 5, as you'll notice in your book, is not there. The staff is diligently working on finishing that up. Yeah, there's a lot of details and data that they're still pulling together, but they've promised that they'll get those to us as soon as possible. And again, that's the section on programs, so you can imagine how complicated that process is to collect that data and get that to us. And we do require a lot of detail. So, all right. So, that being said, would you like an opening comment, Mr. Superintendent?
Well, thank you, Commissioner Cruz and President White and commissioners. I want to thank you for all the questions that you've been asking. It's a very thorough process, in which we appreciate the challenging question, and I want to thank the staff for providing you with timely response to your questions. And in addition to that, I briefly wanted to give you a brief update of where we are. As you know, what you have before you is a draft proposed budget, and when we drafted the budget, it was based on some assumptions. And I don't need to tell you that a significant portion of our finance resources come from the state. So I will tell you that the staff did a great job in providing you with our best estimate. And we're projecting that we were going to get around $25.9 million from our foundation aid. And we didn't receive that precisely, but we believe that with the additional grant and all the effort, that we will meet that target. So we are basically saying to you that we will continue to, and we are going to ask Bill in a minute to give you an update about where we are in terms of making sure that we meet that projection. So we are very happy and appreciative of the resources that we have received from the state, although we did ask for $36 million, but it was a significant ask. And we did ask for 36, but we also made the projection that we were going to get only 25.9, so that we were not certain that we were going to get the 36. So just that you get an update where we are in a more detailed way, I will ask Bill to please speak to that. As you know, I also have sent to you a letter that I did send to, actually we have a copy of a letter that I have provided to you with a summary of basically our situation after the April 1st, not to be confused with April Fool Days, the support that we are receiving from the state of New York. I did thank our delegation for the first time. I've never seen them so united behind our effort. Both the Democratic side of the delegation and the Republican. They were united. They wrote a letter to the Speaker, to the Majority Leader, to the Senate. So it was so important for me to see that unity, given the work that we're trying to do. I think that people are buying into our effort that we need to get our children to read on grade level by third grade. And for example, you see that effort being represented in here in the budget. The budget support our strategy. We have clear priorities, including what we wanted to do for our students during the summer. We asked for example, for significant support to provide 500 jobs for our students, but we are not so sure yet whether we are going to meet that target, but we are working hard to make sure that we do as much as possible, not just for our general summer learning program, but also to provide jobs for our students. Bill, please. Let me help. Are you sure?
So I have two things to share, and I wanted to start, with the sheet here. And the reason why I wanted to start this is, this should look familiar to you when the superintendent presented, his draft budget to you on March 23rd. He listed some key assumptions. So in red, this is where we're, updating you on those key assumptions, that to reflect the enacted budget. As the superintendent said, we assumed, $25.9 million increase in foundation aid in the draft budget, and we ended up receiving an additional $21.9 million. So that's $4 million less than we built in the draft budget. Another key assumption was the nursing aid. We assumed that nursing aid would be restored. You may remember from our conversation that the governor's budget, cut that out. Through the efforts, led by Assemblyman Gant and others, we were able to get that restored, so that would avoid any nursing service reduction. So those are two high-level specifics. Then the next sheet I'm going to hand out to you is a replication of a section of a page in the budget summary, so you see some details to make sure you have some further context. Thanks, Brad. So this sheet that you had before you, you notice up the top here in yellow, that's for the foundation aid. So there's, clearly articulated, what we assumed in the draft budget, what we now know, that we have as a result of the enacted budget, the $384.9 million. Now, that includes, that gap elimination adjustment. In fact, I remember one of the board questions, in the second round that were actually not due to be answered today, but in the future, was they talked about a $17 million increase in foundation aid. That was true, but then the gap elimination adjustment basically got eliminated. It was $4.9 million. So now that's backed off to just about, $90,000. So the net impact of those combination of those two, is that $21.9 million. That's how you get there. And then the other information, that we're working to get more clarity on is included in the state budget was $75 million appropriation for 27 selected low-performing schools. And so, we've been in contact regularly with the State Budget Office and SED about the process to obtain those funds. Included in that list is East High, as an example. So we've been trying to articulate the case that that particular school should go on an accelerated track because, we've been working collaboratively with SED. They've approved the budget. We have an increased significant investment in this budget for that purpose. So we're looking for an early decision from SED to articulate, how much would be available from this resource, at least to support East High. So what we're doing currently is we're modeling different potential scenarios here. We are going to be in a situation where we're possibly not going to have clear information by the first week in May, when the board has to act. But we're going to model a couple of scenarios as far as some reasonable, assumptions to be made from that. So that's what we're currently working at. We've modeled it simply one way already on a simple per school basis. 75 million divided by 27 schools, it gives you a sense of the scale. However, it's a 2-year appropriation, so we're not sure, so you'd have to divide by 2 potentially. But then the language also speaks to, enrollment. So we're now gathering enrollment data from all 27 schools. Obviously, we know it for ours, but we're gathering information from the other schools to do a modeling on the enrollment as well. And so certainly we can reasonably assume that we're going to get some support out of this process. And the question is, what's the appropriate level, to assume in the timeline of the board action. And in addition to that, we are combing through the draft budget, looking for what are other adjustments that we can make, particularly, taking a look at our personnel control management function, to possibly make some adjustments there as well. So the combination of those 2 things, I think, will get us, where we need to be, as far as the overall financial picture. Obviously the programmatic issue, that's the purpose of this discussion, as well as the financial review. But that's where we are on the fiscal side currently. I also have, but it's on the website, and it's all over the internet. I don't know if you want to see it, but these hard to read state aid runs. So you've probably seen them 8 different ways. So they're hard to read. But if you want to see those, I made extra copies for you. But it's those aid runs that generate that question around the foundation aid, because you got to look at the foundation aid and adjust for that gap elimination adjustment. So the good news is now we only have $97,000 left that's being withheld. Statewide, that number is $433 million. So part of your effort and the superintendent's effort and our delegation's effort, did translate into overall significant financial support to the district. And those aid runs, when you look at how others fared, we're certainly appreciative of the effort that everybody put forward.
Okay. We are prepared for your question.
So as we customarily start at the end and work our way back, I had a special request that we didn't start that way, but you ready?
Yeah.
You sure?
Yep.
Take it away. As you get your question ready, as a reminder, we're only doing 1 through a portion of section 4. So if you'll indulge me, if we get out of context with our questions, I'll ask them to bring it back, okay? So I want to get us out at a good hour, because I think the scandal's out again tonight.
What's today?
Today's 7th.
No, what's today? Tuesday?
Today's Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Not much comes on. Being Mary Jane.
All right, so,
Like our TV guide.
I had asked a question about one of my favorite subjects, looking at expanded learning effectiveness. And
Which section, can you say which section you're talking about?
it's numbered 1.26 on the questions. In my original question, I had a page number. Deborah, are the page numbers retained here?
I'm sorry? I couldn't hear you.
It's question 1.26 in the questions that you prepared,
Right.
but I don't know if the page number got retained when you typed up the questions.
Page 7.
The page number from the budget?
Right, that.
It is section 1, page 26?
No.
Okay.
That's 1.26, it's section, it's round 1, question number 26, but the part of the budget book that's referenced in the question is section 1, page 7.
Okay, 1, 7, section 1, page
Right.
7. Okay. So it's in the introductory section talking about expanded learning. And my question was asking for comprehensive data about schools for measures used to assess student growth, because there was a statement made that there was a clear picture of student growth in the original expanded learning schools compared to others. So my question, and there's a nice description here of some of the measures, but my question is just, could we have the study? Could we have this report?
Yes, we did provide some analysis that we had done within the district in the questions, and so it's question 1.26. There's an attachment in the budget questions and the answers that we provided that show the trends and then show the actual study.
Okay, there's an appendix reference. Okay,
Right, there's an
thanks.
appendix. Yep. Yeah, it's right here.
It's on the screen right now.
Okay, but I guess what I would really like to see, because I know that we are investing and we've
Yes.
hired, high-level data analytic people. For some of these areas of real interest, it would be great if we could actually have the reports, with the assumptions, the analysis, the significance levels, that kind of level.
Okay.
For these really important areas.
Yes.
Because these are like central priority areas. So it'd be
Okay.
nice to have access to that data and to that analysis.
So we can talk about exactly what you're looking for, so we can make sure we
Like the
provide it.
report behind this.
Okay.
Like somebody did this report, and this is a summary, and it's certain figures that would have come out of a report. So if
Okay.
we could have the actual report, that would be great.
It is in the appendix, but if you need some more information, let us know. Because it's not an actual study. Basically, this is a research question that you asked, but we didn't commission a study design.
Right, but we have commissioned individuals within the district who are qualified to do this kind of work.
Right.
And
Correct,
so
but
it would be,
It's not study, it's a comparison of when we say the question, is this school doing better than other school in the district? That's sort of like a limited question that we have, and we could give it to you, but we just wanted to be clear, what is it you're asking, because I don't want to promise something that we don't have.
well, when you have a research question, you go about answering it with the design, with assumptions.
Correct.
You set your
We-
parameters for your, what kind
We
of
could give you that.
parameters, and, yeah, that's what I'm looking for.
Right, some of the parameters are on this slide, the way that we did the propensity score matching for non-ELT schools and ELT schools.
Right, so, yeah, so that kind of thing, but just like the real, the next level of detail, like the,
Okay.
thanks. And then, I had asked a question about trade-offs, because, and the reason, what prompted this question, and this is section 1, page 8, talking about funding reading teachers. And I did hear some concerns at building levels about possible trade-offs, that possibly certain things that they had in practice that were used to support ELA, intervention, enrichment, and so forth, might be undermined or a required shift, a central requirement from administration to shift away from some of the things that they had been doing in order to fund reading teachers. So that's what prompted this question. And the answer is that nothing was taken away. And then there's a statement that class sizes were enrolled to the following levels, kindergarten 21, with these very reasonable targets. And saying that then allows classroom teachers to be shifted to reading teachers. But that's not logical. I mean, if we're reducing class size, then you're using resources to do so. and you're using resources to add reading teachers. So this doesn't really answer the question about what's happening at the school level with existing approaches by building administrators and leaders to support ELA intervention in reading. So is
Right.
there another answer? Is there more to it?
No, I think the answer is just another level of specificity to what has been said. So I think that as we looked at our staffing and we staffed consistently across buildings and across sections, we found that there was many classes that were under those numbers. So as we applied a consistent standard across the district, we were able then to free up FTEs that then got shifted to reading interventions. So it's sort of an efficiency mindset, right, where you're just going to you're going to staff the classrooms consistently. That gave us extra FTEs to then give for interventions in reading. And that was actually K-12.
Right, so that's the thing, is that
Right.
K-3,
I see.
or,
right.
and I know maybe, and that's not where you're
It wasn't a
targeting the
one-to-one
reading
match
teachers.
with K-3, correct.
Right, so, okay.
right.
But I mean, at the early levels, there's not very many schools
Right.
where there's very small class size.
We
There are
s-
some,
We
but,
found that more at secondary.
okay.
Yes.
And then, one more, Commissioner Cruz? Or should I, do you want me to?
No, no,
move?
go ahead.
Okay.
Hang on a second, Mary. Do you have a follow-up? Is that a different question altogether?
Mm-hmm.
All right, let me allow GC to do a follow-up, because he had a follow-up to your original question. Thank you.
JC, I have your paper.
Great. So could you, Deborah, would you mind going back to the graph? I thought it was good, this is one thing that parents have asked a lot about, is how we're measuring the student growth in the expanded learning schools. Can you explain the bars and the different colors? I've spent quite a bit of time looking at this, and I couldn't differentiate between the 2 bars that are 12, 13, the 2 bars that are 14, 15, and
Right.
how they
So
match. If you could
there's good and
elaborate
bad
on that.
news here. Okay, the good news is that we'll get you an answer.
Okay.
And I was looking at this myself. Jing, one of the people that works with us, who's brilliant, prepared this, and we've been trying to call her because actually, when you asked me this question, you said, I understand the 5.1 because you add the 2 together. What we don't have in the subnotes is what comprise the 2 different bars. So I am going to have to get back to you on that.
Okay.
We know what comprised the general statistic, but what's the differentiation between the 2 bars? We've been trying to find that answer. Were you able to?
Reading the paperwork, I gave you the comparison tools so we can get more detail. So if you look at the 2 larger bars, so you look at the light purple and then the 2 higher ones where it says non-ELT, they're similar schools, they're going to be like K-8 schools. And then the 2 smaller ones are a smaller group of schools. So it's looking at comparison. I'm going to go into detail. Sorry, 'cause I'm like trying to describe it. So these are similar type schools, so you can do a comparison, and these are similar type schools, so you can do a comparison.
So how about as you go over to the individual school, how does it break out?
We'll have to get information
Right,
on
because those
that.
are, yeah, okay.
So it probably is like a grade level or something like that, so we'll have to look at that. Because different grade levels will have different assessments in them. Okay,
Okay.
but we'll get more detail around that, but that, I think that's a general idea of the 2 different parts.
Okay, yeah, it might be as simple as just taking the colors and updating the key at the bottom so we
Yes.
understand.
Making
Okay, all right,
more understandable
Okay,
for everyone.
So we can
Yeah.
get that for you.
all right, great, thank you.
Thank you.
You good? Good. Okay, Mary.
Okay, and then, I was interested in particular about curriculum implementation in the Reading by Third Grade initiative. And there was a nice presentation from Katie Yarlett. But one thing I was concerned about is it listed $54,000 for professional development. And then it included in this list of professional development, early literacy, instruction and pedagogy, multiculturally responsive teaching, differentiation, online curriculum modules, and hands-on learning. So $54,000 doesn't sound like a lot to cover all of that terrain, and I just was wondering how that breaks down. Do you have a sense, or what is your vision?
So what, is this on? Okay. So what we are looking to do with the 54,000 professional development is have some of our teachers helping us develop the curriculum and also having those teachers train other teachers.
Right.
Okay, so it would be more of a constant grouping of teachers over time, working in these different areas?
Definitely, more of
Okay.
the teachers working
'Cause
together.
that makes more sense to me,
Yeah.
that it's like there's a constant group in a project that's sustained.
no.
And covering different areas than, you know, a $2,000 1-hour workshop here on X, and then, so
No.
that makes more sense.
Yeah, this is for the whole school year.
And
And
it's
also,
over the school year for a group of teachers.
the modules that we already have, we plan to enhance on them. So that is an ongoing throughout the
That's
school year.
another discussion.
Yes.
Right. The online training has already been developed, so that's part of the professional development portfolio, but doesn't have to have funds expended this year.
All right, that's good for now, thanks.
Ben, you want to go?
Yeah, that's fine. I'm going to begin in section 4, with, I believe, probably the more critical question from my perspective. And that is, it's more of a comment than a question. I noticed, and I asked this, and I submitted questions, follow-up questions to my round 1 questions. And one of the things that I noticed was that the high school profiles do not include a sort of any description of the history of the graduation rates for our schools. And I found that to be a significant omission. Now, there is, when it talks about accountability status, it says, I guess, in good standing, GS for good standing. And for example, I'm looking at section 4, page 157, and that's SOTA. And it does not indicate what the graduation rate is. And one of the things we talked about this morning in the leadership meeting is the wonderful thing about where this district is going is there's alignment in the conversations that we're having at leadership meetings with principals and APs and even teachers this morning. There's alignment in those conversations with the district action plan, which talks about ELA scores, math scores, suspension rates, college readiness is the only one that does not appear on there, and graduation rates. And so just for sake of completeness and to ensure that we're synchronized, obviously it's too late for this budget, but for subsequent budgets, I think we might have even had it in the past, we should definitely include a history of the graduation rates. That's the conversation that we're having every place, whether it's in the action plan, leadership meetings. That's the focus of the pipeline report. That's the focus of everything that we're talking about. And it's probably the most important performance objective that this district has, whether we like it or not. So I think it's important that we make sure that the budget reflects that that is our major priority. So that was just a comment there. Was there any reason why that was not in there? Is that just...
Let me just pay a compliment to you, because first of all, the proficiency that you have on the detailed plan, and we are struggling to, actually I'm going to use an hour of the superintendent day to make sure that every employee in the district review the plan, and also hold people accountable for knowing what is in there. So the only reason I could tell you is because, as you stated, something the newness of it is playing a part. But I want us to say thank you for your familiarity, because the plan was developed with the intentionality that was simple but not simplistic enough, so that people will become familiar. So you know, that's not that many pages, but it's very
Absolutely.
concise. And so, you know, I welcome the board also participation in even talking more about this, which you are, and President White, so that it is valued throughout the organization. And we are going to use some time, as I said, with the superintendent day in every department. That includes anyone working from the cafeteria lady all the way to the superintendent's office. Because as you know, as you alluded to, we have issue in the school environment, which is extremely important, but also significant part of the plan is our metric, which is graduation rate. So thank you.
Yeah, and again, I can't emphasize enough that there is alignment and we're synchronized on that very important issue in terms of the performance metrics. And even at ESA, I know Commissioner Evans is constantly talking about the graduation rate.
Yes.
But again, I can't emphasize for those who do not participate in those Tuesday morning meetings, the light goes off when you realize how we're all talking the same language. You know, I was listening to Bohan this morning, and he was saying, you know, striking distance, right? The nomenclature, the conversation has to become part of our culture in every document and every meeting that we have, because I'm convinced that's how the culture changes. So what appears to be a minor omission is actually very significant, because everything else that you're talking about has all those objectives, including graduation rate. So, and while you're complimenting the board, I would give compliments to the administration for, you know, being part of that conversation. And when, as you know, as we were working on those finish line reports, your staff helped us develop that kind of conversation. So I think it's encouraging, and I think people who would read this budget need to see that as well. I do have a couple other quick observations. I noticed that that when the budget talks about eliminating school centuries, it didn't indicate what schools they would be coming from. I think it said 6 school centuries, I count them, would be eliminated. Is there a methodology for selecting where those centuries will come from?
Yeah, you want me to take that?
Yeah, go ahead.
So we have 2 schools that are closing. Well, 1 school that is closing, 1 school that's reducing. So of course, there's some attrition there. And then Lori has looked at each school and looked at the needs of each school and has made assignments. So those are still in process in terms of the actual schools, but the thought process is we're shrinking our footprint a little bit, we're reducing the need for this, and we're taking a look school by school.
And I'm glad someone put that chart up there. It seems, just by the numbers, and I know the numbers can be deceiving, that a disproportionate number of the vacancies will occur out of Vente. Is there a reason behind that?
This chart, and is Harry here? I don't see Harry, but I think this is a list of vacancies, right?
Yeah.
So the, you know, that was our effort to respond to, you know, what are the vacancies, you know, in the institution. The actual positions, you know, change year to year, are included in the personnel section of each section. So you know, the answers to you know, what positions are coming and going are included in each personnel section.
I think I was the one to ask the question, where are the cuts coming from? I realize they are in this book, but this is rather voluminous, and my question was strategic. I wanted for somebody to do the work, and identify all those positions in one place so that I could see where the cuts were coming. And I assume that that's what that is, and that's not what.
So help me, you know, do a better job in answering your question then. So do you want it, you know, because it's in the book by location, do you want it like by title, or how do you want to see it?
I just want to know one pager that says where all the cuts are coming from, departments, however you want to organize them. But to the extent it can fit on a page or two, I want to be able to just look at it on one page, not have to count them up myself.
We had that information available, and Harry will provide that to you. We could send it. Do you prefer us to send you an email?
To Shanae.
Or on the next meeting when we meet?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Yep.
We will have that for you.
And Mr. Chairman, just one other question. I noticed that in Appendix 1.2, it said the Director of Latino Affairs position was on there. The impression that I got in reading that notation was that, and I could be wrong about this, that position or that budget line was going to be eliminated. Did I read that correctly, or?
That is not correct. There's some discussion going on that I have with Commissioner Cruz on campus, and the finance will be available, but we might have a partnership with Nazareth College that will help us do some of that work. But again, that is the desire of the board, there will be a contract coming up for your consideration, and I think that would be the appropriate time for you to decide if that's the way you want to still continue to pursue, for next year.
So the administration's recommendation is that there, and I can't locate the appendix 1.2, but I'm positive it said that position was eliminated. What you're shooting for is not to hire someone internally, but to contract with somebody.
Correct.
So
but
that's why
not-
it's eliminated.
Not just with somebody, but also use the partnership with
No, I-
Nazareth College.
No, I
Because
understand
they
that.
have so much expertise in the area of bilingual education.
I just wanted to make sure that it was understood that goal is still going to be implemented.
Actually, the position, it's on page
It's in section 6, page 64.
64, but again, I just want to, what I told you still stand correct.
All right, thank you.
Good evening. Section 2, page 27, just a general comment. One of the things we have to do is, and I know it's within our budget plan, and maybe we're talking about it, but these enrollment things that we just constantly, I almost feel as though we make it a fait accompli that we're losing students. You know, like okay, it's just, we're gonna lose students, so we gotta do whatever. We gotta make sure that we stress about what we're gonna do to attract more students. Because I don't buy, I just don't buy the fact, when we're doing things in our budget, some of it has to do with our communications department. I think we gotta do a better job of talking about what we're doing and get people there. But we always put in here about how we're losing students, but we don't do a good enough job of talking about how within the budget context, and this is related to the overall framework, and Mr. Superintendent, this goes beyond your budget people because they're just in charge of putting the numbers, they are what they are. I think we really have to talk about have a chart that shows our projected enrollment, but where we want it to be. Like, what are our goals for trying to attract some of these students back so we can get back up to 2014-15 actual levels? Our problem is that we say, oh, another charter school opening, so that's it. I mean, we can't do that. We have to, just as we project what we're going to get in revenue and what we're going to spend in expenses, we need to start projecting about how many kids we're going to get back here. And it's people's jobs that are here. We're paying folks all this money. It's folks' jobs are here so they can be out there trying to recruit and get kids to come back to the district. Because if we don't do that, we're not going to be able to survive. I'm a supporter of urban suburban. I'm a supporter of those programs. But at the same time, they're supposed to be two-way programs. Okay, the suburban to urban piece is key. We got to work on doing that. But we need to really have another chart where we say we're projected to lose these people, but we're also going to start projecting on how many kids we're going to start bringing back and how many kids we're going to retain. Because I'm very interested in those numbers. And if we don't have a plan on that, we should get a plan on that, like this budget cycle. Like we have a projected here of losing 27,624. We can say, okay, that's what's projected, but we're going to work to try to get it back up to this level, and here's how we're going to do it. So that's just one observation there. Because we know enrollment drops, but I still think there's a lot of opportunity to bring students back there. So that's that section. The other observation, and I don't think I asked this question, was, and this can be a follow-up for the next round, Ms. Flanagan, is if we can get a list broken out by what positions in this current budget year are going away because the person is tied to a grant, or the position is tied to a grant. Because my concern is that, for example, I believe there was a position, family service coordinator, or I don't know, community coordinator, that we did last year, was tied to a grant. Is that what's in there? What is it called? What's the title?
Volunteer coordinator?
Volunteer coordinator, right? So we talk about how great volunteering is. And we have we get a grant for it, right? And we say we want to volunteer, we want people to do it in the community. And I remember worrying about this last year, saying, okay, we're doing this position, we're taking a grant for it. And I'm not one of these people that think that we should just take a grant just because it's out there. Because if we can't sustain it, why are we taking grants for it? And I think we have to be very careful of not just to apply for a grant if we're not going to sustain it. So if I could get, as a follow-up round, the grant positions that are related to specific positions, what's going to happen there, that would be great. And then overall, because, yeah, I mean, we have the sections where we have how much we're getting in grants, which I think is good. I think we do a great job in grants. I think we're probably one of the best in the state after New York City in terms of getting money for grants. So if we can get that along with that other, as the President White asked for with the positions, if we could find out how, because that would give us a good indication on what's happening with a lot of these grant funding positions, because this is important because it also relates to programs. And then lastly, and then I'm sure we'll probably do another round, is,
Ask them all now.
and this could be asked, this could actually be done later, but what is our, and I know some people don't like this word, but within the context of this budget and within the context of this school, what are the marketing plans for these schools? What are the marketing plans for these programs to let the community know? And I want an actual dollar amount of how much we are spending to actually market. If you turn on WDKX almost every single day, there's a charter school commercial. And I mean, they're good charter school commercials. And some of the charter schools are doing the exact same programs that we're doing and has less than actually we're offering, but they're out there marketing it. So when you look at that enrollment, that's why their enrollment's going up, because they're going around bragging. And I've written letters of support for some charter schools. I have no problems with charter schools, but we're a large institution. We got to market what it is we're doing. So I'm wondering how much within the context of this budget, as it relates to school or whatever, the line item is for marketing, for outreach, whatever it is we want to call it. Where we're saying, and we do have some billboards for young men. I've seen. What we're doing for that. We gotta market the product that we have and not operate from the deficit model in which we're constantly talking about what we don't have. I mean, even if you go out, someone called me the other day and they were upset with me. They said they're a graduate of the system and they're on the West Coast. They went to our website and they said, why are you guys talking about how poor you are? That's the first thing you talk about. Talk about some of these great programs that you're doing. I mean, we are doing great stuff with Edison. We gotta market this stuff. We gotta market this stuff. We're doing good things. We're not taking enough credit for what we're doing right because we're constantly talking about what we're doing wrong. So I want to know what, as it relates to school or whoever, what we're doing to market these programs. I was somewhere and people that still only think that we have one exponential learning school. They don't know that School 10 and School 10 and School 8 are EL schools. They don't know it. So I'd like to see what, and I would be supportive, Mr. Superintendent, of. I know we got budget constraints, but I would be supportive, and I have no problems in having an allocation that relates to marketing. It's very important with schools, with any organization. You got to be able to talk about the good things that we're doing. So it doesn't have to be tons of money, but we got to do a better job of getting the word out about the programs that we have in this district, so we can reverse that enrollment trend. So I'd like to see those things as follow-up. That's it for now, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner, I just one, clarification, and we'll get your answer to your question of grants. One thing Everton and I have talked about is our convention has been, if the grant-funded position goes away sometime during the year, we don't show it in the book, even though it's could be funded for 3 months or for 9 months. So it's a little bit confusing.
Right.
So he and I have had a conversation about, how do we show that, going forward, because, because they're, it's just the nature of grants.
Exactly,
they don't line up with our fiscal year.
Exactly.
And
I
then,
don't know if it's an asterisk that says anticipating that this position might go away when grant funding ends midway through the budget year. Yeah, I don't know.
So we're talking about that because it also then allows us time to seek other grants to keep things going. So that's the
right, exactly.
So that's
so
that.
We think that it's important because I think it would just be so surprising if it's such a great grant, right? Let's say we have such a great grant position, and we're all for it, and it fits into our priorities. But if it's tied to a grant and then it goes away, what happens to the continuity of the program? I just think that it has a major impact on the district for what's going on, and this is something we've been talking about this for years. We talked about it for years. What do we do when a program that we support goes away and then the grant goes away? I think it was President White a couple of years ago talked about that. So I don't know how you would show that. Maybe it's an asterisk saying, you know, it's going to show up for the first 3 months of the year and then it's going to go away. I think that is something you would have to work out. But I think it would be very instructive for us because then you could even put it in the board's lap and say, hey, look, do you want us to continue this as a priority? Because you may have to take it from somewhere else if you think that this is important. But I think it raises the level of understanding. And also, I think it could help us with leverage in terms of other funders or the state or whoever to say, hey, look, we're doing this great thing. It's part of our overall priorities. It's part of something that you're doing. What do you want us to do? And one of the examples I think we can use with that, although it may not relate specifically to positions, is the grant that was related to pre-K for 3-year-olds, right? Because that grant's ending, and that's something that we all love, right? But it's a grant. So either we have to try to find the money for that or try to go get a grant somewhere else or reapply. So I think that if we have that context, we can do that because sometimes we get criticized saying, okay, you start this great program and then it's gone away. So I don't know how you would show it, but I think it could be very instructive for us and our colleagues, particularly around this time when we're trying to look at priorities and in the context that we, from sitting on the finance committee, when we do these budget amendments throughout the years, perhaps that's something that we could keep in mind and we can kind of know what's coming up in the queue.
Did you have one?
Yeah, I just, as a follow-up, and I know you said you wanted to stick with the sections.
I do.
But as a follow-up, I'm looking at section 647 to Commissioner Evans' question. I might have missed it, but it doesn't appear to set aside or indicate what the budget would be in communications for advertising. So as a follow-up, I'm interested in knowing what we spent and what we will spend on advertising and television advertising. Because he's right, I hear it all the time on DCAX. Charter schools are advertising big time. And I'm wondering what we're spending and if we've thought of putting money in the budget for that purpose. So just as a follow-up. Thank you.
We'll pull that together for you. One thing I have to compliment Chip on is he's really, has a better integration now for UPK, for example. There's certain grants, that you have significant resources for in other areas we're starving. And so he's integrated the messaging, around the institution, maximizing, those grant opportunities to continue the messaging of the institution.
And to that point, kudos on the UPK. I think we do a great job of getting the word out on that, both in radio and print and even on billboard. I think we do a great job of the UPK piece. So maybe even if we can maximize some of the other grants, if they allow that, I think that could be great. But again, I'll reiterate my point. I am not opposed to, I could stand up to anybody and say that that's important in any organization or company, your brand, your whatever, because you have to tell that story because other people are out there telling it, and the people that are telling it don't know a thing what they're talking about. Last time they set foot in the school was when the Earth's crust was cool. You know how long ago the Earth's crust cool, right? A long time ago. Another Malikism. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Are you coming to me? Yep. One of the questions that I asked was about the itinerant teachers, and, oh gosh, what page was that on? The response that I got was more focused on the family career teachers. I'm looking for that page. Sorry about that. Where the question is. I'm looking in the questions, yep. I just read it. What was it? Oh, it's 1.8? 1.18. Thank you. Beautiful. Who was that? Thanks, Barbara. All right. So and I see that Jennifer's going to request the health staffing. Is there going to be a shift in how health education is delivered? What's that going to look like? What's the implications? And if you could talk to your response a little bit, that would be great, Christiana, please.
Yes, there will be a shift. We're moving the family and consumer science classes to the 7th grade this year because we wanted to give the 6th graders more time for AIS. And as we move forward next school year, we're looking, because the family and consumer science teachers are very hard to find, so we're filling them up with excellent teachers, and that is not helpful. How do we develop a more comprehensive program that we are either integrating them into health or other areas, but at the same time offering students what they need, and also be able to offer student AIS if they need them?
So what will it look like delivering health education? And I'm just curious more so, you know, our kids need this at such a young age. So I'm just curious, as a district, granted, lots of demands for students' time based on this, so we've got to be able to educate them on things that they're not getting. So is there any thoughts on that?
Definitely, we want to focus our energy into the social and emotional, and also be able to provide the career and advancement skills that students need. But how do we deliver that in a more cohesive way than what we are doing right now? Because our curriculum is there, but it's not giving students what they need. That's what we are going to figure out as we look at our curriculum. We have a big curriculum work coming up this coming school year. How do we integrate? We may need to integrate. We may need to offer advisory for students, for social emotional. We may need to offer them courses that help them develop those skills to look at careers. Even when they're young, they still need that experience and exposure. So we're looking at ways to achieve that.
So if, just as something to be helpful, at the Wellness Committee, we just met last week, and one of the things that we did talk about is there's a couple of former health teachers that integrate it in, and it's working really well. Audrey talked about it. We were actually talking about having some of the teachers come to the committee because it's such a big need for our students. And so what my fear is, moving it to 7th grade and, you know, losing because typically the health teachers and family and career science teachers are the ones that are itinerant. So I just want to know, and it sounds like you guys aren't there yet, what's the plan?
So this coming school year, we will have the family and consumer science in the 7th grade. We will not have them in the 6th grade because our 6th graders already have taken that course. So what we're going to do is use this year to farm up the program and make sure that the program is comprehensive and it serves the needs of our students, and that it's not as fragmented right now as it is. So we're looking at health, which is a very good area of integration, but we want to work with all the family consumer science teachers and cross-curricular. Next year, as we move into the next school year, we want to work with everybody to develop a curriculum that is comprehensive, that will address the need, and at the same time fulfill the requirement for students.
So what you're saying is that next year will be kind of like a curriculum building year?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. Got it. And then on page 2.6 in the budget, one of the things when it talked about priorities, I saw customer service, or not 2.6, yeah, 2.6. So it talked about communication and customer service, and I saw that the ombudsman that was added last year was never filled, and now we're not going to fill it. So, which is fine, you know, whatever, that's what you choose. Any good customer service program, if you're not measuring it, if you're not monitoring it, it doesn't happen. And in a culture where we've talked about that we need to demonstrate more urgency, and not necessarily it's being able to reward what people are doing well. So it's not necessarily playing gotcha all the time, but it's rewarding when it's going well. So is there a formal recognition program on customer service, one? And two, so what are we going to do if this is still a priority? The elimination of that position is telling me that it isn't a priority anymore.
Okay, it's continued to be a priority, but you have to look at the evidence of work. You look at our department, and they are making significant stride. And we just made a strategic decision that we need to get the people throughout the organization to understand that from the superintendent to that custodian, customer service is the job of everyone. And because of financial challenges, we've made a strategic decision, and that's something actually right now I continue to audit customer services by different departments. I have mentioned to the board time and time again how much stride we've made on placement. We are monitoring phone call. We are monitoring complaints. We are monitoring the aesthetic of our buildings. We are basically continuing with that comprehensive focus, but I do think that to shift the culture, you can't just have an individual. So in a time where you are continuing to struggle with, I remind this board that the budget gap that we have that continue to persist, that we plan to eliminate by 2018. And back to Commissioner Evans, if you don't have services inside your school, that should be your core value. You know, do I continue to have more arts teacher? Or address, for example, the challenge that we had with our K-8, where we are putting more resources there. So it's a balance in terms of how you fund your priority rather than retrieving from your priority. But it's a great question. It's one that we see ourselves bringing that position back, but given the challenges that we are facing, after all, the board needs to be commended because we took a challenge of $66 million, shifting resources, and closing a $40 million gap. So we also wanted to lead by example in terms of things that we ought to do, like, for example, the fact that everyone who are managers should be tracking customer service. For example, we were falling short in our 48-hour response. We immediately sent a message about 3 months ago and say we need to continue with this.
So maybe that's what would be helpful. So one, I would make the recommendation to take that part out of the budget book because it says it right on there. It's the first key action that's in the budget book under number 3. And what I would say is, going to Malik's point is, what have we seen within the organization in terms of customer service? So you're talking about successes. So if you're measuring that, I would like to see what's different. What are you measuring? So response times are this.
Mm-hmm.
Parents are saying this. Monitor, when you're monitoring those calls, what's different?
We can provide you that. For example, part of our work when we're talking to our partner, our unions, is that we're going to have, and we could use any help, we're going to track by doing something that is done in the industry. Like we will call different departments and see what kind of response we are getting. I could tell you that right now, the technology department is in the cutting edge because we are also measuring internal services. If a teacher called that they say that the smart board is not working, I will respond to that. So we will share that with you.
That would be
simple.
Nothing.
Actually, I need to credit Commissioner Cruz and you as well, and each one member of the board. But when I had the conversation with Commissioner Cruz, he mentioned to me Carlos Cavallada, who was a former regent and did great work. And he continued to help us and give us guidance. So we haven't dropped that, but we will give you an update on the work that is being done.
And then just one question about the ESL teachers on the appendix. It's number 7 here with the breakdown. And with the ones that just when I looked at School 9, I saw that they were losing 2 teachers bilingual. I think it was 1 through 3 and 4 through 6. 1 bilingual teacher each, as well as the other, I looked at, you see 28, there's 2, they're losing 2 ESL teachers, and I think 22, yep, 1.6. And I know that those have high, typically Hispanic bilingual population, so I'm just curious what the rationale is for the changes in those.
No, that's a great question, Commissioner Campo, right?
So specific, you had referenced School 22.
Yep.
And School 22 in particular, what we're doing is we've recrafted the School Innovation Fund grant. We're looking at also then within the context of that grant, recrafting the bilingual programming. And as a result, we're better aligning staffing and personnel with student-specific needs. So we're looking at very detailed information on student performance data and proficiency data that's language-specific. We're also accessing Myra Ortiz and the bilingual office and the related programming, looking at the overall current service delivery model. And as a result, based on registrant counts and other variables, those other variables, we've taken into consideration those personnel needs.
Okay, so that's 22.
And I appreciate your question. We will continue to monitor that because talking about messaging and marketing, the community could be confused because we keep saying that we need more than. And I appreciate you raising the question. It's something that we need to monitor closely.
Well, and especially with those 3, they have such high Latino populations. So with 9, what it was in the budget book. It says that it's staying, the ESL teachers are staying the same, but it was in the breakdown, it was the, yep, so teacher elementary 1 through 3 and 4 through 6, it was going down a position. So I'm sure that it was added somewhere else. I'm just trying to figure out.
But we will, I'm sorry, Commissioner
Oh,
Campbell.
that's okay.
I'm glad you're raising the question because School 9 is one that we will have to come back to you because that's a school that is in urgent need of improvement. So as Bill was mentioning to you that we are going to be applying for some specific grant. So we have, we are meeting right now for both Monroe and school number 9 as part of the 2 schools that we haven't taken action yet. As you know, the board took action on East. And I'm talking about the receivership school.
Yep.
Right.
So your attention to, and I ask each member of the board it's something that we're going to have to focus our attention in both of those schools because we're only going to have 1 year to make significant improvement, or else we end up losing control of that school.
That's a section, that's a question we're going to probably have more so in section 5 as well. So we'll, as a heads up to the staff, these are the kinds of questions that we're going to be looking for in section 5 for that, related to that. So, as a thought. Okay, GC? Let me take a quick poll while you're thinking. Are we pretty close to your last questions?
I have 1 or 2 questions, comments, yeah.
Real quick.
Yeah, brief, mine are really brief. One's an observation.
Okay, just trying to get a sense of where we
Yeah, mine was an observation.
Okay. All right, GC.
Would you pull up there was a question that was asked in the first round was submitted. It was question number 9. It had to do with special ed. And really around the $4.2 million reduction going into next year using this year as a baseline. There's some good detail at the bottom that explains where that money is coming from, roughly 41 FTE. Got a 2-part question. One is kind of high level around how will you measure the effectiveness of the changes in special ed from this year to next year? How will you know that making these reductions actually provides a better service to the students and to their parents? And then more specifically, it would be very helpful to see at the school level how something like that 40.8 FTE breaks down, where at each of the individual schools, what's the baseline that was looked at for 14, 15, and then what's the reduction going into 15, 16. And then you'll see something specific in the questions that get forwarded this Friday? This Friday that asks about one specific school, one specific class, so we can try to get a little bit of a handle on how does this affect the kids right at the classroom level. So if you could start a little bit with how do you expect to measure the special ed changes, and how will that be, what are the metrics around that, and then some specifics around where you expect the reductions to occur.
Okay, if you don't mind, I'll start with the latter part, because actually in round 2 questions, you'll be receiving a detailed breakdown of the special education teacher reductions at every school, so you'll be able to see very clearly where they're coming from in every school,
Okay.
as well as it'll also include paraprofessionals and teacher assistants and speech staff. So you'll see a breakdown of those special education staffing at each building and the reductions or increases that were done building by building. So that you'll have, that breakdown. As far as measuring progress, we're going to continue to do what we did this year when we compared the 13-14 continuum of services and the changes we made this year in the 14-15 school year. We've looked at all the assessments that we conduct with all of our students, and we have benchmarked the outcomes on those assessments from last year to this year to see how students are performing on, let's say, the NWEA, the state assessments, the Regents exams, as well as looking at the progress students are making towards their individualized education program, their IEP goals, and measuring that progress based on the performance the student made the previous year. So there are intermittent benchmarks that we're using data-wise based on assessments, on how students are progressing on assessments, as well as how they're progressing towards their IEP goals, looking at the program they're in from year to year. So we'll have, just like we had the data that we've shared with you that shows the progress that students made 13-14 or 14-15, ICOT, integrated co-teach, looking at students in consultant teacher and comparing that. We'll be able to actually look now at, I'm a student that was in an integrated co-teach last year, and now I'm in a consultant teacher model this year, and we'll be able to look at the progress that student has made.
Okay, and you said that was part of one of the presentations that you've given, either, I know you gave one of the finance committee at one point.
Yes.
That specific information was included in there at the school level, or I seem to remember it being more generic and not being able to look at some of the detail.
The evaluative data was provided at a district level, but I have it available at a building level if that's something you want to see.
The building level, I think, would be very helpful to be able to see that, especially as we start looking at and comparing what reductions there may be in certain buildings going into next year.
Okay, yeah, I can make that available.
Okay, and I've got one other question with special ed. As we go to the model, we start mixing more special ed students with the general population. Is there any plan to have a cap on, say, the percent special ed students going into the general ed classrooms?
Well, currently, the switch that I think you're referring to, the movement from integrated co-teach at certain grade levels to a consultant teacher model, both are integrated programs, so the students in general education already, it's just changing the delivery of the service. But we're looking at, so for example, in an integrated co-teach classroom, there are a maximum of 12 students with IEPs that can be in that classroom. Next year, when you look at that same classroom in a consultant teacher model, we're looking at no more than 30% of the overall class size would be students receiving consultant teacher services.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
All right, Mary, you quite
Okay. I have a question about Title I. In the first section of the budget book, and it's probably talking about different pots of money within Title I, but there's a discussion in the intro section saying that there's expected to be a decrease. And I had asked for, detail about like what parts of Title I were decreasing, what the magnitude of that decrease would be. And it talks about SAS lump sum allocation being decreased. But then in the second section of the budget book where you talk about high-level overviews of the funds, the revenues, you talk about a $3 million increase in Title I based on most recent information. So
Right.
is the most recent information that there's an increase, not a decrease?
Correct.
Okay.
But within, the, the resources that we're funding Title I for, there were some shifts, to fund our priorities, including the reading teachers, okay? So what the $3 million reflects, it reflects the information that we received from the Council of Great Cities, which in the past has been a very good source for us. And we anticipate to get an increase in Title I funds as a result of our increasing in poverty level, as a result of the new census data that's been integrated into that formula. There is discussion at the federal level whether or not that'll stick, going forward. But for the upcoming year, based upon the information that we received in D.C., that we can reasonably anticipate that. We won't officially know that from the state education department probably until the end of May, right? So that again is one of these areas where we're using our best information available to put together this budget.
Okay. I just want to be clear though. I mean, when we're asking questions about a revenue source, we're asking about the revenue source, not the intention to, use some of it for reading teachers and therefore, have an implication that the pot is limited or something like that, just to be clear. So,
yeah, and to be forthcoming, because, we're super transparent. In fact, the state budget office, when they, review the discussion with us, they literally track online all the steps that we made, with the board. Remember back in December, we anticipated a decrease in Title I funds because we had not known that new information, from the census would in fact be enacted into law and new revenues would flow from that because, that had been the best information at that time.
No, and I
back in
get it,
December.
and that you can't edit every single section of the book ongoingly. I get it. And then I'll just focus on one other question. I had asked about Wilson IB, the anticipated change in the model there to expand access to IB courses. And I had asked about assumptions regarding smaller class sizes in order to implement that model and what that might cost. So there was, again, in one of the higher level sections, section 1, there was a discussion of $0.7 million increase in funding that's held in the secondary school chiefs department, which is intended for the IB transformation, expansion of IB at Wilson. And so the answer was that staffing allocations took into account the IB recommendation of 15 students per class. And the increased funding does cover the class size reductions necessary to expand IB. But then the next paragraph is the class sizes for Wilson Foundation and Wilson Commencement were developed using the same criteria as other schools, which is 28 for 7th through 12th grade. And then it goes on to say that the $0.7 million is currently budgeted in the Chief of Schools Department and will be allocated in more detail, and it will include not only those teaching positions, but administrative, clerical, and instructional supports, as well as professional development, curriculum, and materials. So to me, this sounds pretty fantastic. I mean, fantastic meaning it doesn't match up. So, and then to further support the concern, in the actual Section 4 staffing model, the teachers at Wilson Commencement are slated to go from 85.9 FTEs to 69.5 FTEs. So, we have, and I know that this is near and dear to Commissioner Evans, getting Wilson right.
Sure is.
And this is concerning because we're saying one thing and it doesn't match up, and it's concerning.
Thank you, and I'll attempt to address it point by point to the best of my recollection, because that was a lot of information. The Wilson IB
Well,
for all.
it just boils down to have IB programs, especially if you're going to serve students who are not highly motivated to be in IB courses, the class size of 15, like essentially, I'm envisioning that it's necessary to have class sizes of 15 almost entirely throughout Wilson High School.
Okay.
If you really are serious, if you're really serious about making IB for all, and you're saying that we're going to accelerate academics for all students in my neighborhood, then you better have class sizes of 15, and you better have really highly motivated educators there who are putting a huge amount of effort to make it work.
Sure.
Because I haven't seen a quote-unquote failing urban school implement IB for all with class sizes of 28 that are currently in trouble the way Wilson is currently in trouble.
Sure.
So if we're going to do it, please show us a serious.
So let me address it on a couple of fronts. The first thing is, when we started out with the idea of IB for all, one of the first things was to address what you're saying, the seriousness of what is IB for all. So, and we can definitely talk more, and actually, you know, if the board is interested in giving a presentation, that's something I'm more than willing to talk with you all about, because it is really exciting. With that piece, let me talk just a little bit about the whole budget implication piece of it. Was starting with looking at students who are serious about being an IB for all piece of that. We're taking it very seriously. And with that being said, two pieces. One is looking at the class size. IB for all, and that vision is really about opening up the opportunity for any student to be in an IB class. And what that would mean is opening it up for all of our juniors next year to have the opportunity to engage in an IB class. And we recognize you can't do that with a class of 28. So in looking at that and looking at the staffing implications, we need to increase the staffing in those areas to open it up. Okay, that's number one.
But, so are you going to address that it goes from 89 to 69? So, I mean, and Wilson already had suffered, I believe, some teacher decreases over the last few years.
So one of the assumptions that we did with the staffing this year is we looked at the students that are going to be at Wilson with the enrollment. And so we also matched it up. So one of the things that's happened at Wilson in the past is we had a projection at the freshman level of 180 seats. This year, what we're projecting moving forward is 130. So we're also matching up the number of staff with the number of students that we project to be there. So enrollment numbers and staffing, as we look forward to this next school year, we're looking to match up more accurately. To also address looking at the budget projections, one of the things is under the school chiefs, budget, we have put together a robust budget projection with the breakdown in the professional development, the staffing that is at Wilson, the training that is needed for our teachers, as well as the students that will be attending Wilson, and that is all underneath that umbrella of the budget.
All right, not to belabor this point, but I mean, at every concrete number that you look at, it just is the opposite of what's being said. So yeah, you're right, the enrollment projections go from 736 to 661, but across the board, they do that because of the tightening assumptions, the assumptions for attrition and absenteeism. So that's in the ballpark of many of the other schools in terms of the lower enrollment projection. In terms of pupil to teacher ratio, it goes from 8.6 to 1 to 9.5 to 1. So you actually have an increasing ratio as you're proposing to do IB for all. I'm so passionate about this because this covers this concept of where people make sweeping statements and accusations that those of us who are concerned about the impact of poverty and the need for social supports, that we are somehow implying that children in poverty can't learn, when what we are advocating is that adequate and realistic supports be put in place, and that we take it seriously, and that we actually look in the faces of these kids, and we actually believe that they will learn, and we put in place what will allow them to learn, instead of making these sweeping statements about, you know, well, you think that kids can't learn, and then you have some hyper slick solution that sounds good. And that's what I'm afraid that this may be turning into, is some slick thing that looks good and sounds good, but that doesn't have the underpinnings and the resources and support to make it work. So I absolutely support IB for All. I absolutely support acceleration. I know that some of these guys are the most brilliant people that are around our neighborhood. But don't tell me that you're going to put them in an IB for All class and then have it be just like a straw. You know, have it be a house of cards or whatever, you know, the analogy is. So that's why because these numbers these numbers do not support a realistic plan. And I don't know if there's...
You know, just to follow up on that too, I love IB and I love IB for All, but I think the larger question is the execution, how that's going to work, how it's going to be successful. Because I don't want to see another Northeast, Northwest college prep. And that was before Bohan, the superintendent, got here.
Okay.
And we can't have another Northeast, Northwest college prep, because what's happened over at that school is embarrassing. So if we are going to do IB for All, we need to make sure that it's IB for All with fidelity and the correct infrastructure, or just not do it. Just keep it the way it is, and that money that we were going to use for IB for All, give to the school for other support. So that's I think very, very important, because you know we want to, and IB is a program too that we can advertise to get people to stay, but I think Commissioner Adams' point is well taken. It really needs to be with fidelity, because you've seen what happened, and then and the superintendent knows how I feel also about STEM, the STEM school. I mean, you know, it's crazy. If you look at the charts of the graduation rates that was just at the ESA committee, STEM, Northeast, Northwest College Prep, those schools, I mean, we thought that all those kids would be able to do this College Board model with all this, and you see what happened. So I don't want that to happen with this IB for All proposal, when we're saying it for all and then it ends up being for none, and then costing us money. So I think we just have to be very careful and say we're not saying that they all can't do it. We just need to, because that is a rigorous program. In fact, I know someone who probably was smarter than me, and they couldn't even really get through it in a way that made them successful. And if we do it and don't have the supports, it's just not a wise decision.
Yeah, and I just want to say briefly, and we have some more specific information. That is our goal, and also back to evidence. The school graduation rate just went up. It's projected to continue in that path, but also we have some of everyone in our district is committed to our students succeeding, but we, as you remember, and this board supported that. We brought Sue Janston, who used to run that school when I think your children, Commissioner White, went to that school, and other who know, she knows what she's doing, and if it's someone understand the word fidelity, it's her. So that's something that I will welcome the board at some point to go and get an update. And what's going on at Wilson, we have invested a significant amount of dollars in the infrastructure of that school. Actually, we went into our capital plan because it wasn't just the academic that was fading away, but there was so many other aspects of the building. So another aspect of the program is that we not just getting buy-in, but we are bringing families to and making a commitment, engaging them, and we are even asking for students to write an essay about their interests. And one of the things that we found was that we found a lot of students there that didn't even know what the word IB meant. So we are in that path, but I'm going to have Evanton give you an overview more specific around your number.
Yeah,
Or your computer broke down?
I know the number.
Okay.
As it relates to the 700,000, what happened is that as we put the budget together, they had a plan to add the FTEs. The FTEs that they were adding, they were waiting to see what other funding was coming in before they allocated it. So by the time we printed the budget book, we had this $700,000 we didn't want to put in their operating budget in the school. So it would seem as if their operating budget was getting out of control. So what we did, we put the $700,000 in the chief's department, and we're working with Wilson to see what FTEs they need to purchase. So when they tell us which teachers they need to buy, you will see those numbers switch. That number will be used to purchase personnel for IB program. But they were not able to provide us the detail for it in time to get it in the budget book in that section.
Okay, well, I'll be watching closely because, I mean, you're starting from a baseline of a significant cut.
Right.
Aside from that, so, you know, aside from
The 700,000.
partitioning, right, you're starting with a bigger cut in teaching staff than, I would say, average, having looked through them. Maybe I could be wrong as far as, maybe it is average.
I think it would be fair to say that when we make the adjustment, we will be making the adjustment, and then you could, we would be open if you think that that's not an appropriate number, and we need to revisit. I think that the intention of the board is just to make sure that when we make a promise, that we deliver on that promise, and that is well understood by us.
Just very briefly, since the superintendent mentioned it, yes, my kids did go to Wilson, and I cannot tell you how rigorous that program was. And at the risk of sounding elitist, I don't, and I don't want to poo-poo the idea of IB for all, but I would be very surprised if every student could perform at that level. So, I mean, and if you are going to do it, you have to properly resource it with teachers, and I understand that that's going to happen. But that, one of the things about that program is, we could say, hey, you want your kid to go into a rigorous program where every child has to perform at this level, we got it. And this is connecting what Commissioner Evans said earlier on. But I think Commissioner Adams is absolutely correct. If that is the goal, and I'm not saying it's not an admirable goal, I don't know how realistic it is, knowing what my kids had to go through and how many times they thought about leaving that program and their friends left that program. I know Ed can speak to this as well. Very, very, if it is the program that I understood it to be as a parent, I don't know it that well as a commissioner, as Commissioner Evans and Adams do, but that program is no joke. And so if that's the goal, I think she is absolutely right. That has to be sufficiently resourced, because I can't imagine that entire population being able to perform at that level. But I'm supportive if that's what you're trying to do, but I also hear what you're saying. We got to make sure that there are teachers that can support those kids. So the other thing I wanted to say really quickly is I should have began with this. This is, I don't think people who are watching this, if anybody's watching, or outside this building, 131 West Broad Street, really appreciate what kind of endeavor this is for you guys to put this together. I neglected to say we appreciate this effort. We know that people lost a lot of sleep, a lot of angst and anxiety over decisions that you had to propose to us, and all the while supporting an agenda for bringing about change in this district. So, and also, I might add, having watched this, as my colleagues have over the last 7 years, it wasn't always this way. And I've said this repeatedly, Dr. Vargas, and this is not the first time, and it certainly won't be the last time I say this. When I came on the board, it wasn't like this. There was, and you point this out in the summary, there was significant disruption in the people that staffed our buildings. Every freaking year, hundreds of people laid off. And I really thank God first, and you and your staff, that we don't have that experience. We have challenges here, and we have some tough decisions. But man, Malik, you all remember that? That was just, every year it was like that. And that, you know.
Yeah, with a board had the right budget.
Yeah, well, that year too, but this is, and I said this before, Dr. Vargas, you know I've said it, and I will continue to say it, this is dramatically different, and it makes the board's job 100% easier. And then, the fact that there is, again, I can't emphasize this enough, that we are synchronized, that we are in alignment on using the budget to accomplish the board's and the district's goals. That is very important. So, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I wanted to make sure that that the staff understood how appreciative we are of this important work.
We appreciate the compliment, and what I would say to the board, to thank you to you, because we could bring Wilson back. When Commissioner Evans went there, there's no reason. Our children are as smart as Commissioner Evans. But we had the right team in place in there with the support of the former principal. And she's committed. And that is not to say that people were not committed, but producing and executing a well-planned IB programs take time. And the only thing I would say to the board and to this community is, including our families, because after all, they're essential to make this work. That we just need to continue to monitor and to ask questions like you asking today. You know, back with the marketing early, that Commissioner Evans is so right, but if you market as something and you don't deliver on that promise, which I think is what Commissioner Adams and President White is saying, and every one of you is saying this, that we need to do it. And I appreciate that work, because sometimes you are misunderstood when I often have said that we need to deliver on that promise. And our children potential are second to none. I'm not saying that we're better than anyone else, but we're certainly not second.
I'm almost done, Mr. Chairman, but I got to add this point about my kids at IB. It is a fantastic program insofar as you want to talk about college readiness. My kids were able to, I don't want to say cruise through college, but they were ready. They were real. You know, people talk about our kids aren't ready. We hear that about kids who go to MCC. Let me tell you something. They were, it was, and I don't want to say a cakewalk, but having gone through IB, they were ready for the college experience. And I'm very proud of that fact that my kids hung in there, because it was not easy. Mr. Chairman, I have a question that relates to Appendix 1.1, which indicates that the director, and if I've read it correctly, the director of recruitment will be, that position will be eliminated. If you could describe, and you could do it later on, I'm concerned about what efforts we will make to recruit, the age-old problem of having a diverse instructional staff. You don't need to answer that now, but if you're eliminating that, I assume you have some plan for doing that. And I think in a follow-up question I said, well, I inquired as to what were we doing last year to increase diversity. There was a time before I got here that I understood they would even go to Puerto Rico and recruit teachers. So I'm interested in...
Several of us volunteered to do that.
Yep.
Yeah, I want to go tomorrow. And is that, and just to tag on to that, and if, when you answer that, if that position is particularly tied to a grant?
The other question I had, Mr. Chairman, is I want, and you can do this later, but I wanted to know what the Chief Accountability Research and Development position was going to, what the job description for that position, and I wanted to know if that was, if it is proposed that that go into SEG. It wasn't clear in reading that document. Again, you don't need to answer that now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All right. And by the way, the reason why I was very quick is today is Bridget's birthday. I have cheesecake in the car. So,
yeah, well, you know what? In that case, I'll be quick. Because as much as Bridget puts up with, I got 2 quick points. My first point.
Invited?
Absolutely not.
My first point is on Section 1, page 13. I just have to stress this, that I'm happy to see that it includes, that we're including the $500,000 in the offices of the Deputy Superintendent for Teaching and Learning, earmarked for the Special Task Force on School Climate and Violence. That's good, but let me just be clear, and I said this in ESA and everywhere else. I'm glad we're spending the money, but we shouldn't have to spend any more money on school climate and violence suspensions, because if we do and follow the process that we're supposed to follow, we won't have to be spending any extra money on this. So, and the other thing is that I'm not waiting for this school climate, and I said this to Commissioner Adams, I know you are a representative on that. Yes. I'm glad that we have this. engaged the Community Foundation. You know, I've been on the Community Foundation board for years, so I'm very supportive of this task force on climate. But we're not waiting, we don't have to wait for this task force on climate to enforce the things that we are supposed to enforce. And in particular, the Auditor General reports that relate to student suspension. We need to make sure that we enforce the recommendations that are already in those reports and that we follow the agreed upon processes. We now have the appeal process that we're doing and all that other stuff. But I'm glad we have that amount of money. I don't know if it needs to be 500,000, but let's not think that we got to wait till this climate report is done and all this other stuff. We want to see something with suspensions absent of that. And I know you've heard that before, Ms. O'Toole. I said it at ESA, and I just want to reiterate that again for the record.
We are not waiting, and Dr. O'Toole will tell you that every week we're monitoring, and I just, once again, we are making great stride.
Yeah, we are.
One day, I got a call from President White saying to me that we sent a letter to the parents, and we were not even communicating the right. I apologize. I say, I can't believe it, only to know that that letter was being sent home for years. So I totally concur with you.
Right,
We can't wait to do the right things.
Right. And I think that
But however, we do know that the problem is more complex than just enforcing the rules. And we need our families, we need our students and the entire community need to come together. Actually, our goal should be one day, I would say for this board, in the next 5 years, we ought to give an incentive to the school that does it first when we remove the metal detector.
Right.
We have a school in Buffalo, New York that don't have metal detector downtown. So why couldn't we have it, excuse me?
School without walls.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay, school without wall, but we can, and they still have scanning there, but that's a different story. What I'm saying is that you are absolutely correct. We're not going to get out of this situation by just putting more money into the environment. Some of the environment need eventually we need to aim for that.
Right. And my other piece too is, and I'm glad you mentioned enforcing the rules. See, because that's our job as a district, right? So this committee, what I'm looking for them to maybe address the holistic pieces, the other pieces that are outside the rule enforcement. But you know this prior to your arrival, we weren't even doing just enforcing the rules. So we shouldn't be looking to this committee to talk about rule enforcement. That's our job. We should be doing that now anyway. So I think that we're starting to do that now. We're starting, with the letters and the improvement on that. So that's good.
And sometimes you have to go slow to go fast, and I understand your frustration in this area. But what I'm saying is that we want the community also to own part of this. Sometimes they say, well, that's the teacher doing something to us, or that's the school, and we want the community participation. And Commissioner Adams have been in the forefront of, actually, I remember having conversation with members of the community that they just want the school to enforce the rules, but also they wanted to make sure that we're doing in a just, appropriate way.
Right. And then my other question, I'm sorry, Ms. O'Toole, was there anything you wanted to add?
No, thank you.
My other question was on section 1, page 14, being that we got good news from the state, because Dr. Vargas went with his tin cup to Albany. Or collection plate. You went with your collection plate to Albany and came back with a little extra money. The closing the budget gap, we were going to use $3.8 million additional use of the fund balance. Will that number now change or be adjusted? And if so, by how much, being that we are now getting more revenue, will you be able to take less from the fund balance, or is that something TBD, to be determined, you need to get me something right?
Actually, I said that we were going to be on target for the projected 25.9. However, I take your question on one that it would be our top priority. Should we receive additional dollars? Because there is still some grant, and as I mentioned to you, and that's important. I know that this might not be the time, but I think that this board would be wise to make sure that you have sufficient fund for the rainy day, given what I have given to you in my projection in terms of the we had a good year this year. This was the best in 8 years. but we had to make sure that we don't count on it year after year that this is going to happen. So I think I take that as a welcome warning for us that should the opportunity present itself, that we will take advantage of it and recommend it to the board, balancing everything else.
Right.
I do think that had to be in the front line if we get that if we
So-
have an opportunity to.
So we don't know yet?
We don't know yet at this point, but like I said, we will put it in, it would be, if we were fortunate enough that we were to receive additional funding, I think it would be wise, when we prepare this budget, we're thinking about next year.
Right.
So that we don't, now I will tell you that hopefully very soon you will find how we're going to end out this current year. That may I, give you more confidence in using this dollars if we were to project that we are going to end in a very healthy situation, which we hope we will.
And I'm talking about the additional foundation aid. So the additional foundation aid based upon the school, or based upon the school aid runs that came out. Right now, we still don't have enough information based
No,
on the school aid runs that came out?
we do. So maybe I wasn't clear in the beginning, so let me try again, okay? We had counted on, a $25.9 million increase in foundation aid, right?
Right.
What we received from the state was $4 million less than our assumption in the draft book.
Okay.
So it's $4 million less.
Okay.
However, there's allocation of funds across the state, $75 million for those 27 schools that are in, severe priority status. They have their own word for it. And so what we don't know is how much of that will we receive. There's a process that we need to go through where we have to apply to SED, and then SED has to obtain the budget director approval as well for those funds to be released. So we're not going to know the detail of that, or we're unlikely to know the detail of that, by the time the board acts.
Right, yeah.
So,
What's their deadline? Is it June?
correct.
June is when the
June.
Yep,
Okay.
correct. So that's where we're at. We are well positioned with East, and we've already communicated to them that hopefully East would be the first out of the box
Right.
to get approved, given all our investment and communication around that. And again, the appropriations for 2 years, at least that's what it says in the bill.
All right. Thank you.
Just one follow-on, well, actually two. One on section 4, page 39. For school 12, the enrollment by student classification, it's all zeroed out. So if you could just add the numbers, just set those out, that would be
Okay.
great.
Thank you.
And then lastly, as, looking at Monroe, just doing a quick numbers and comparison. So we're looking at 15 and 16, we're going to increase student enrollment by 40. We're decreasing the budget by almost $500,000, and we're decreasing down to 7 positions, is what I'm looking at. This is page 130. So I am just curious what's going on there.
Yeah, I'm going to have Evan, that's a
Yeah.
great question.
Because that doesn't make sense to me.
No, I think you might have a situation like we have with Wilson, but I just want to, and if we don't have the
Yep,
answer.
yeah, that's
we
okay.
can-
I
I mean,
just
let me
wanted to
check.
pose it.
Why don't
today.
we raise that? And again, thanks for raising that. Monroe is another school that we cannot open like we did open this past year. We have, let me repeat for the board, 1 year of receivership that is now in the hand of the district, that if we miss this coming year, we're making significant progress, then we are in a very difficult situation.
Right.
And, we can't afford not to have the support that they need there.
Yeah, it's totally, yep.
Yeah.
So just a final comment. There have been a lot of requests tonight for additional information regarding budget amounts year over year, headcount amounts year over year. Any of the appendice type spreadsheets or worksheets that you send out, could you please send those in Excel rather than PDFs? A lot of times like to go in and do some calculations, manipulation, just to see where things come out.
I need time to reflect on that. The only reason why you have a practice of the PDF, because then it's, to the extent that it's clear that it can't be altered. So that's why you send things out in a format that way.
You can lock an Excel document though,
Okay.
can't you? So it can't be edited, the original version, but you can.
So that's why I got to be reflective of how do I adapt to that, because I deliberately do the other. So we're clear on what you send out. It's a PDF, so people don't manipulate it and then send it somewhere else.
Actually, can I bring up the privacy, the public versus, can I raise it? So this year, there was a statement that there was a desire to not publicly post our questions and answers, which has always been a past practice, and GC has been good about disseminating for parents to be able to see our process. And there was a response this year that there was a desire from the administration to not allow that public process. Is there, I object to that. I feel strongly that they should be posted publicly as we usually do.
I'm unaware of that dialogue.
I don't know where that happened, but we will look into it, and just want to be...
Can we do our past practice and just...
Yeah, we could.
Okay, great, thank you.
Right, and I said that.
We will post it, so that's the, I know that Commissioner Evans has an interest to. President White has some birthday, so that's a type 1 problem. When you raise, we love those type of problems here in the district.
We're in agreement.
We know what the problem is and we know how to resolve it.
All right, let me begin to, is there any other last burning question?
Better not, because Bridget ain't having that, man.
Sorry.
The cheesecake is probably,
My wife be threatening me, I'm scared of her.
just a,
I just wanted to clarify. I did send an email saying that I had checked with Ed Lopez Soto, and he had checked with Bill Ansborough, and they were in agreement that it could be publicly posted, the questions and the responses, so I'm not sure where that came from. But that's why I had asked it specifically, because I didn't know whether to post all of it on just on the public site, or if a certain level of access should be required.
This is good news. This is one of the rare times in education that we had the right answer and timely, and so we're in great shape.
Thank you.
okay, I'm gonna wrap up, since my deadline was 8 o'clock and it's 7:55 right now.
I just been told that it's posted already.
It's already posted.
So, you have a computer with you guys? Go right ahead. What is the webpage?
There's a couple things that, before I wrap up, one of the things that actually that annoys me is when I get emails that are blatantly misinforming, or are based on misinformation. And what annoys me the most is that they're being sent by people who should know better. And so one of the things that I think, and I don't know, Mr. Superintendent, where this goes, but I think we really need on our website some portion of it, that when these things come up, like ICOT versus consultant teachers, right? This is a classic example. I know you guys got the same emails that I got that said that they were eliminating, one said special ed totally in the district. Another one said they were eliminating ICOT completely. They're putting in these consultant teachers and getting rid of all the staff. So you get these kinds of emails, and and it is annoying because we know better, because we've learned how to ask questions. But the problem is that you have a lot of parents out there and folks who don't understand. They hear that, and then it gets disseminated out there, and it's hard to control once it's out there. So I think somewhere on our website we need to have a corner to respond to these kinds of issues, so that when something comes up like that, that parents can go to that corner and say, okay, well, I'm hearing it from the district, the teacher, I'm hearing it, this is what I'm hearing in regard to that particular issue. And it's not that we're eliminating special ed in Rochester.
I would like to have a,
I mean, I don't care how it is. That way, when somebody calls and says, hey, Jose, they're getting rid of special ed, and I say, you know what? On the website, there's a whole breakdown of what that's all about. Feel free. Or I'll send you the link. Or I'll copy that out for you and send it out to you. But at times, you know, we get broadsided by this stuff. So I think that's, and that goes for a lot, you know, other issues. But I wanted to bring that up.
thank you.
The second part is, I'm wondering if we do finish lines for schools, right? Can we do finish lines for populations? I'm thinking bilingual ed students. Because we're having this ongoing conversation with bilingual ed, and it occurred to me that it'd be interesting to look at a finish line, you know, report on children who are in the bilingual program. So we can look at, you know, absenteeism or, you know, that kind of stuff, and look at it from a segregated group. Might give us some indications.
Yeah, we could do that, and I have asked, I think in the past, for us to have a website that just, for the, a dashboard for the bilingual population especially. I think we had the talent here, Barbara and her team and all that could do that, and thank you. We also could incorporate that in the finish line report. It is there, but it is hidden. We have to go further to do that.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so in closing up, I have a couple other questions, but I'll send those off as round two. But as a reminder, Thursday at 6 o'clock, we have a public hearing on the budget. You know, Commissioner White reminded me of what it was like when I got here the first year, and we had those public hearings.
Yeah, one went to 1 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, yeah. So to be in a room right now discussing a budget and everybody's quiet.
Well, that kind of work, you never know.
Well, at least here, right? Because they got contentious even with the staff. So I want to echo his comments. I think it's been, your staff has really put together a great budget. And it's just not having the kinds of issues that we've had over the number of years is helpful, at least for our own stress, right? And the other reminder I have is on 15th of April, next week, the second round questions are due. So please have those in.
The questions are due this Friday, the 10th.
Oh, the
responses are due.
Oh, sorry. So Friday, the questions are due, and then next week, the 15th, the responses are due. 8:01.
And it's on section 4 and 5?
Sections 4 and 5, right? Yeah.
And any follow-up questions?
And then any follow-up to the sections. Yeah. There, without objection? Okay. We'll let Bridget have her choose. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.